Dr. Amara Washington's finger hovered over the emergency call button as 6 officers aimed their weapons at her head. "Pentagon clearance level 4, she said calmly, reaching slowly for her ID. One wrong move and her brilliant career, and life, would end on an airport tarmac. Before we dive into this shocking story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. If you've ever experienced or witnessed racial profiling, hit that like button and subscribe to hear more. Stories of resilience in the face of injustice. Can one ID card really save your life when prejudice has you in its crosshairs? Let's find out. 34-year-old Dr. Amara Washington had always been exceptional. With 3 patents to her name and a PhD from MIT in aerospace engineering, she had broken barriers most couldn't even approach. Her office wall displayed framed certificates and honors, but it was the small, worn photograph of her parents that meant the most. Colonel James Washington and Evelyn Washington, a dedicated high school science teacher, had raised their daughter in Atlanta with twin pillars of excellence and resilience. "You'll have to be twice as good to get half as far," her father would say. Not as discouragement, but as preparation for a world that would constantly underestimate her. The call from the Pentagon had come 6 months ago. At first, Amara thought it was a prank. When she realized it wasn't, she sat down on her couch, phone pressed to her ear, as Deputy Defense Secretary Williams outlined the opportunity. Lead engineer on Project Hyperion, a classified next-generation aircraft design that would revolutionize military aviation. "Your work on thermal-resistant alloys made you our first choice," Williams had said. "The country needs your expertise." What Williams didn't say, but what Amara immediately understood, was that she would be the first Black woman to lead such a sensitive project. The weight of that responsibility settled on her shoulders alongside the technical challenges. Her parents had celebrated with her over dinner, her father's eyes shining with pride even as he reminded her to document everything. "Cover yourself," he'd advised. "Every decision, every meeting." Now, 6 months into the project, Amara was rushing to pack her apartment for an emergency flight to Edwards Air Force Base in California. A critical test of the prototype's heat shields was scheduled for tomorrow morning, and the team had encountered unexpected material fatigue. The project was already over budget and behind schedule. Failure wasn't an option. Her phone rang as she carefully packed secure documents into a specialized briefcase with a biometric lock. "Washington," she answered. "Amara, it's Admiral Richardson. How soon can you be at Reagan?" Admiral Jane Richardson had been Amara's champion from day one, a rare female flag officer who understood the obstacles Amara faced. "I'm heading out now. Should make the 7:30 transport if traffic cooperates." "Good. The president's been briefed on the situation. This test needs to succeed or funding gets redirected. Chinese intelligence is watching our progress closely." "I understand. I've identified the problem in the simulations. Just need to implement the fix on site." "That's why you're the best." A pause. "Amara, you know there's resistance to having you lead this." Amara stopped packing. "Because I'm young, or because I'm Black?" "Both. Plus female. The trifecta. Some powerful people are waiting for you to fail. They'll be waiting a long time." Richardson chuckled. "That's my girl. Safe travels." Amara ended the call and resumed her efficient packing. This wasn't her first encounter with doubt and prejudice. During her doctoral defense, Professor Harrington had questioned if she really understood the theoretical foundations of her own research. At her first engineering job, colleagues had assumed she was an administrative assistant. At the Pentagon, a general had asked her to fetch coffee during her own presentation. Each time she'd maintained her composure and let her work speak for itself. Each time it exhausted a little piece of her soul. The briefcase locked with a soft click. Inside were schematics and data that would be worth millions to foreign governments. Amara had been through extensive security training, learning counter-surveillance, techniques and protocols for traveling with classified materials. The special courier status granted her expedited security screening and access to military transport, theoretically making her journey smoother. In practice, her courier status often created more friction. Security personnel frequently expressed disbelief. made extra calls to verify her identity, or subjected her to additional scrutiny that white male colleagues rarely experienced. Amara checked her watch. 5:45. If she left now, she should have enough time to navigate security and board the waiting jet. She did a final sweep of her apartment, ensuring no sensitive materials were left behind. The specially designed tablet containing additional project data was secured in a hidden compartment in her carry-on, its contents triple encrypted and set to wipe if incorrect access was attempted. She took one last look at her apartment before locking the door. A stack of scientific journals sat unread on her coffee table. A half-empty mug of tea had gone cold. The life of Dr. Amara Washington outside of work was on indefinite hold. Again. The weight of national security rested in her briefcase and on her shoulders as she headed for her car. The irony wasn't lost on her. She was responsible for protecting a country that sometimes struggled to recognize her as one of its own. Reagan National Airport buzzed with early evening travelers as Amara strode through the main terminal. Unlike the tourists and business travelers crowding the public gates, she needed to access the private terminal reserved for government officials and military transport. Her Pentagon credentials should provide smooth passage to the secure area, but experience had taught her that should rarely translated to reality. Amara checked her watch again. 6:20. The military transport was scheduled for 7:30, and pre-flight protocols required her to be there at least 30 minutes early. Plenty of time, assuming everything went according to procedure. The first checkpoint separated the public terminal from the secured government area. A heavy-set white security guard with Whitaker on his nameplate glanced up as she approached. His expression shifted subtly as he registered her appearance. "ID and authorization," he said, his tone immediately clipped. Amara produced her Pentagon I.D. and special travel authorization with practiced efficiency. "I'm cleared for the military transport to Edwards Air Force Base. Courier status, priority clearance." Whitaker examined her credentials with exaggerated thoroughness, holding her ID up to the light, then comparing her face to the photograph with narrowed eyes. "Purpose of travel?" he asked, despite the clearly marked courier designation on her documents. "Classified Pentagon project," Amara replied evenly, maintaining eye contact. She'd learned early that looking away could be interpreted as being shifty or suspicious. But maintaining eye contact too intensely could be seen as aggressive or challenging authority. The narrow line between these perceptions was familiar territory. "Wait here," Whitaker said, taking her credentials to a computer terminal. Around her, other travelers with government clearance, mostly white men in suits or military uniforms, were being waved through with cursory checks. Amara felt the familiar burn of indignation rising in her chest, but kept her expression neutral. Showing frustration would only play into the angry black woman stereotype and potentially create more delays. Her mind flashed back to her undergraduate years at Georgia Tech. A professor had accused her of cheating after she scored highest on an advanced physics exam. "These answers don't seem like your own work," he'd said, emphasizing your own in a way that made its meaning clear. It had taken 3 meetings with department heads and a review of her previous academic record before the accusation was withdrawn. No apology was ever offered. "Excuse me," she said to Whitaker, who was now making a phone call while holding her documents. "My transport has a strict departure time. Is there a problem with my credentials?" Whitaker held up a finger to silence her without making eye contact. "Yes, I've got a courier authorization for a Dr. Washington, but I need to verify." Other travelers were beginning to stare. Amara felt her visibility increasing with each passing minute. The sole black woman, being held at security while others passed freely. It was a spotlight she'd never asked for and couldn't escape. A female TSA agent at the adjacent station, an older black woman with close-cropped gray hair, caught Amara's eye and gave an almost imperceptible head shake, a gesture of solidarity and shared understanding that spoke volumes. The small acknowledgement bolstered Amara's resolve. Whitaker returned to the counter, still holding her documents. "My supervisor needs to approve this clearance." "That's unusual for Pentagon courier status," Amara noted calmly. "Is there a specific concern?" "Just procedure," Whitaker replied, though they both knew it wasn't. Another 5 minutes passed before a harried-looking supervisor appeared. He glanced at the documents, then at Amara, then back at the paperwork. "Everything seems in order," he said, sounding almost disappointed. He handed the credentials back to Amara rather than to Whitaker. "You're cleared to proceed to the private terminal." "Thank you," Amara said with professional courtesy, though gratitude was the furthest thing from what she felt. Being granted what was already rightfully hers never warranted genuine thanks. As she collected her belongings and moved toward the private terminal, she checked her watch again. 6:45. The unnecessary delay had cost her 25 precious minutes. She quickened her pace, the secure briefcase feeling heavier with each step. The private terminal was less crowded, populated mainly by military personnel and government officials. Amara spotted the sleek Gulfstream jet through the windows, already being prepared for departure on the tarmac. Just a few more checkpoints and she'd be aboard, leaving this particular indignity behind. But as she approached the final security station before the tarmac access, she noticed the guards there watching her approach with unusual intensity. One spoke quietly into his radio. Something wasn't right. Amara straightened her spine and continued, forward. Credentials ready. The lesson her father had instilled in her echoed in her mind. Never show fear. Never show doubt. Own your presence in every space, especially the ones that weren't designed with you in mind. The private jet gleamed under the airport lights as Amara approached the tarmac. Her security clearance allowed her to bypass the typical boarding procedures and walk directly to the aircraft, a necessary efficiency for high-priority government transport. She could see the pilot through the cockpit window, running through pre-flight checks. What she didn't immediately notice was James Randall, a private security contractor recently hired to supplement airport security. From his position near the hangar, Randall spotted Amara walking confidently toward the government jet. Without hesitation, he raised his radio. "Possible security breach on Tarmac 7, he reported, his voice tense. "Unknown individual approaching restricted aircraft." Amara was halfway to the jet when she noticed unusual movement in her peripheral vision. Several security personnel were converging on her position from different directions. Still, she continued, walking, her Pentagon credentials clearly visible on the lanyard around her neck. This wouldn't be the first time she'd have to explain her presence, despite having every necessary authorization. "Stop right there," Randall's voice boomed across the tarmac. "Hands where I can see them." Amara stopped, keeping her movements slow and deliberate. "I'm Dr. Amara Washington, Pentagon Clearance Level 4. I'm authorized for this transport." "Don't move," Randall shouted, maintaining his distance. "Put down any bags slowly." "My credentials are right here," Amara said, pointing to her ID without reaching for it. "And these bags contain classified materials. I'm not authorized to set them down unsecured." Randall's hand moved to his holster. "I said put the bags down now." Within moments, 3 airport police cars screeched onto the tarmac, lights flashing. Officers emerged with weapons drawn, using their vehicles as cover. "On the ground! Get on the ground now!" Multiple voices shouted in confusing counterpoint. Amara remained standing, her heart pounding but her exterior calm. Her father, a 30-year military veteran, had prepared her for situations like this, though he'd hoped she'd never face them. When confronted by armed authorities, he'd told her, "Moving suddenly can be fatal. Speak clearly, move slowly, if at all, and never give them a reason." "I am Dr. Amara Washington," she repeated loudly and clearly. "I have Pentagon Clearance Level 4 and am authorized courier for classified materials to Edwards Air Force Base. My credentials are on my lanyard. I am not a threat." The officers maintained their positions, weapons trained on her. One shouted for her to put her hands on her head, while another simultaneously ordered her to lie face down. The contradictory commands created an impossible situation. Obeying one would mean disobeying another. Amara chose to remain perfectly still, hands visible at shoulder height, neither reaching for her ID nor moving to the ground. Any sudden movement could be misinterpreted with fatal consequences. Her phone rang inside her jacket pocket. The unexpected sound caused several officers to tense, fingers moving closer to triggers. "That's my phone," she announced calmly. "It's likely Admiral Richardson from the Pentagon checking on my delay. I'm not going to reach for it." "Do you believe Dr. Washington is being treated fairly in this situation?" Comment number 1 if you think this level of security response was justified, or number 2 if you think racial profiling is clearly at play here. Like and subscribe if you've ever witnessed someone being treated differently because of their race. What would you do if you were surrounded by armed officers giving contradictory commands? The danger Amara faces is just beginning, and her training is about to be put to the ultimate test. The phone continued ringing, adding to the tension. One officer shouted for her to turn it off. Another warned her not to move her hands. The impossible situation was escalating by the second. Thurskanko. The chaos. Amara caught sight of a pilot emerging from the jet, looking confused at the scene unfolding on the tarmac. If he recognized her as his intended passenger, he gave no indication. "I am going to remain perfectly still," Amara announced. "I am not a threat. I am a Pentagon official with courier status transporting classified materials. Please check my credentials." Sergeant Wilson, the ranking officer on scene, signaled to his colleagues to maintain their positions while he cautiously approached. His weapon remained aimed at Amara's center mass. "No sudden movements," he warned. "Understood," Amara replied. In her mind, she was calculating survival probabilities. Any movement too quick, any gesture misinterpreted, any officer too nervous, and this could become another tragedy, another hashtag, another name on a protest sign. All because she dared to be a black woman walking toward a plane she was authorized to board. Wilson stopped several feet away. "Identify yourself again." "I am Dr. Amara Washington, lead engineer on Pentagon Project Hyperion. I have level 4 security clearance and courier status. I am authorized to board that transport to Edwards Air Force Base. My credentials are on this lanyard, and my documentation is in my inside jacket pocket." "Slowly remove the lanyard and place it on the ground," Wilson ordered. "Sir, with respect, these are high-level security credentials that I'm not authorized to leave unattended. I can hold them out for your inspection." The standoff continued, a tableau of American dysfunction. A highly educated black woman with top security clearance being held at gunpoint while trying to serve her country. From the terminal windows, Amara could see faces watching. Airport staff, travelers, security personnel, all witnessing what was unfolding. Someone was holding up a phone recording. The humiliation burned, but she compartmentalized it. Survival first. Dignity would have to wait. The standoff on the tarmac entered its 6th minute. 6 minutes of Amara standing perfectly still with multiple weapons aimed at her vital organs. 6 minutes of calculating every breath, every blink, every subtle shift of weight. In those 6 minutes, her life had been reduced to a single imperative: survival. More security personnel had arrived, creating a perimeter around her. Amara counted 8 officers now, plus Randall, the original security contractor who had initiated this nightmare. Most kept their weapons trained on her while a few communicated through their radios. Sergeant Wilson remained the closest, still holding her Pentagon credentials, examining them with suspicion despite their obvious authenticity. "These could be faked," he muttered, loud enough for her to hear. "They include holographic watermarks and RFID chips that can be verified with the proper equipment," Amara replied calmly. "The Pentagon Security Office can confirm my identity and authorization." Wilson ignored her suggestion. "What's in the briefcase?" "Classified materials related to Project Hyperion. I'm not authorized to open it except in a secure facility." "You expect me to let you board an aircraft with an uninspected case?" "I expect you to follow federal protocol for Pentagon couriers, which prohibits local law enforcement from demanding inspection of classified materials." Wilson's expression hardened. He didn't appreciate being educated on procedure by the person he considered a suspect. Through the terminal windows, the crowd of observers had grown. Amara could see airport staff pointing, passengers holding up phones, security personnel clustering together. She wondered how many videos of this incident were already circulating online. The thought reminded her of conversations with her parents over the years. Her mother once said, The hardest part isn't the encounter itself. It's knowing that no matter how qualified, educated, or innocent you are, your life can still be reduced to a split-second decision by someone who sees your skin before they see your humanity. Amara had understood intellectually, but now she felt it in her bones. Her multiple degrees, her Pentagon clearance, her crucial role in national security, none of it protected her from this fundamental vulnerability. A new officer approached the scene. Lieutenant Sandra Hayes, a white woman in her 40s, conferred briefly with Wilson before approaching Amara. "Dr. Washington," she began, acknowledging Amara's title in a small but significant show of respect. "I'm Lieutenant Hayes. We're trying to sort this out. Your credentials appear authentic, but we need to verify with the Pentagon directly." "Thank you," Amara said, genuinely relieved at this first sign of reason. "Admiral Jane Richardson is expecting me. Her direct line is in my contacts, or you can call Pentagon Security at their verification hotline." As Hayes nodded and stepped back to make the call, Amara noticed Randall, the security contractor, speaking emphatically to another officer, gesturing toward her with obvious agitation. He clearly wasn't satisfied with the direction things were taking. The minutes stretched on. Amara's arms were beginning to ache from being held at shoulder height, but she dared not lower them. Her phone had rung twice more before falling silent. Admiral Richardson would be wondering why she wasn't answering, why she wasn't on the plane, why the critical materials for tomorrow's test hadn't departed Washington. Suddenly, a loud voice cut through the tension. "This is Lieutenant Hayes. I have Admiral Richardson of the Joint Chiefs on the line. She's confirming Dr. Washington's identity and demanding to speak with the officer in charge." Wilson stepped forward reluctantly, taking the phone. Even from several feet away, Amara could hear Richardson's authoritative voice emanating from the speaker. Wilson's face gradually lost its certainty as the Admiral spoke. He looked at Amara with new eyes, not apologetic but recalculating. "Yes, Admiral. I understand, but our contractor flagged her as suspicious and—" Wilson winced as Richardson apparently cut him off. Hayes approached Amara again. "You can lower your arms slowly, Doctor. We're working to resolve this." As Amara carefully lowered her aching arms, Randall stepped forward. "She still needs to open that briefcase. Security protocols." "Her courier status overrides local security protocols," Hayes interrupted. "Pentagon, verification is sufficient." "Not to me, it isn't," Randall insisted. "For all we know, she could have stolen that ID. I need to see what's in the case." "That's not happening," Amara said firmly. "These materials are classified above your clearance level. Opening this case in an unsecured area would constitute a federal offense." Wilson returned, handing the phone back to Hayes. His demeanor had shifted, but not completely. "Admiral Richardson has confirmed Dr. Washington's identity and authorization," he announced reluctantly. "But we still have security concerns about the unverified contents of her luggage." Amara felt a flash of controlled anger. Even with direct Pentagon confirmation, they were creating new obstacles. She wondered how much of this was genuine security concern and how much was an attempt to save face, or worse, a refusal to acknowledge their error in profiling her. "Sergeant," she said, her voice steady despite her rage, "I understand your concern for airport security, but I need to board that plane with these materials intact. The test scheduled at Edwards cannot proceed without them, and any delay impacts national security." Before Wilson could respond, a crackling came through multiple radio units simultaneously. All officers turned their attention to their communications devices. "This is Pentagon Security Office Central Command," a voice announced. "We have been notified of a situation involving Dr. Amara Washington at Reagan National. Be advised, Dr. Washington has Yankee White clearance and priority courier status. All local security personnel are instructed to facilitate her immediate boarding without further interference." The reference to Yankee White clearance, the highest level of security clearance in the U.S. government, finally seemed to penetrate. Several officers holstered their weapons, though Randall and Wilson remained visibly reluctant. Through the terminal windows, Amara spotted something that made her heart sink. A news van had pulled up to the airport entrance. How long before this became a national story? How long before her name and face were splashed across screens as another example of America's unresolved racial tensions? Despite the Pentagon's intervention, she remained standing on the tarmac, surrounded by armed personnel, her critical mission delayed, her dignity assaulted, all because she had tried to do her job while Black. Admiral Jane Richardson was not a woman accustomed to being ignored. As the first female African American to achieve flag rank in her branch, she had navigated decades of institutional barriers and biases. When her protégé and the lead engineer on a critical national security project wasn't answering her phone, Richardson did what powerful people do. She started making calls. "What do you mean she hasn't boarded?" Richardson demanded, speaking to the pilot of the waiting transport. "She was scheduled to clear security 40 minutes ago." The pilot's response sent Richardson immediately reaching for her secure line to airport security. Simultaneously, she activated her emergency response team, a protocol typically reserved for potential asset compromise or national security threats. Back on the tarmac, the situation was evolving rapidly. Lieutenant Hayes had become Amara's de facto advocate, attempting to create space for reason in an increasingly chaotic scene. "Dr. Washington's identity has been confirmed at the highest levels," Hayes argued to Sergeant Wilson. "We need to let her board her transport immediately." Wilson, his authority publicly challenged, remained obstinate. "Pentagon procedure doesn't override airport security. That briefcase needs to be inspected." "Actually, it does," Hayes countered. "Federal courier protocol explicitly states that classified materials are exempt from local inspection. It's basics." Jurisdiction. Randall, the security contractor who had initiated the confrontation, pushed forward. "No one boards with uninspected luggage. Not on my watch." "It's not your call," Hayes said firmly, "and it's not ours either. This is Pentagon business." As the officers argued jurisdiction, Amara remained the calm center of the storm. Despite the profound injustice of her situation, she maintained her professional composure. The mission came first. Her personal feelings about this treatment would have to be processed later. Her phone rang again in her pocket. "That's likely Admiral Richardson again," Amara said. "May I answer it?" Hayes nodded, while Wilson reluctantly agreed. "Slowly," he warned. With deliberate movements, Amara reached into her pocket and retrieved her phone. The screen confirmed her suspicion. "Admiral Richardson." "Admiral," she answered, keeping her voice steady. "Amara, what in God's name is happening? I've got the pilot saying you're surrounded by police. The Pentagon security office is lighting up, and the test team in California is asking where their materials are." "There's been a security misunderstanding," Amara replied carefully, aware of the many ears listening to her side of the conversation. "Airport security and a private contractor flagged me as suspicious as I approached the transport. They've been reluctant to accept my credentials." Richardson's voice became ice cold. "Put whoever's in charge on the phone, now." Amara held out the phone to Wilson. "Admiral Richardson would like to speak with you, Sergeant." Wilson hesitated, then took the phone. "This is Sergeant Wilson, Airport Police." Even those standing several feet away could hear Richardson's voice booming through the speaker. Wilson's face cycled through expressions, defensive, then surprised, then increasingly concerned as the Admiral continued her blistering assessment of the situation. "Yes, ma'am. No, ma'am. I understand, but our protocols..." Wilson winced. "Yes, ma'am. I'm aware of federal jurisdiction." "No, I wasn't questioning her credentials, just following procedure for unverified." Wilson's colleagues watched uncomfortably as the dressing down continued. Being publicly reprimanded by a Joint Chiefs Admiral was not an everyday occurrence for airport police. When Wilson finally handed the phone back to Amara, his demeanor had shifted noticeably. "Admiral says we're to escort you to your transport immediately," he muttered. "Thank you, Sergeant," Amara replied professionally, taking back her phone. "Admiral, I'm being escorted to the transport now." "I'm staying on the line until you're aboard," Richardson insisted. "And Amara, the Secretary of Defense has been notified. This incident will not be swept under the rug." As Amara began moving toward the jet, Flanked by Hayes and Wilson, Randall stepped into their path. "This is a serious security breach," he insisted. "That case needs inspection." Hayes placed herself between Randall and Amara. "Stand down, Randall. This is over." "It's not over until I say it's over," Randall replied, hand moving toward his holster. The tension spiked again as officers reacted to the contractor's aggressive posture. In the momentary chaos, no one immediately noticed the arrival of a black SUV on the tarmac until its doors opened and 3 individuals in dark suits emerged. "Federal agents," announced the lead figure, a tall black man with close-cropped gray hair. "I'm Colonel Jackson, Pentagon Security Division. Everyone stand." Down immediately. The effect was immediate. All airport personnel except Randall lowered their weapons or stepped back. Jackson approached rapidly, his gaze taking in the scene with professional assessment. "Dr. Washington," he said with a nod of recognition. "Are you all right?" "Yes, Colonel," Amara replied, relief washing through her at the sight of a familiar face from Pentagon security briefings. Jackson turned to the assembled officers, his expression stern. "This woman is carrying materials vital to national security. She has clearance levels that most of you will never achieve in your careers. The Secretary of Defense is personally awaiting her arrival in California." He paused, letting the implication sink in. "And yet she's been held at gunpoint on a tarmac for nearly 30 minutes. Wilson started to speak, but Jackson cut him off with a gesture. "Every minute of this incident has been monitored by Pentagon security systems through Dr. Washington's credentials. Every word, every action, every violation of federal courier protocol has been recorded and will be reviewed." Jackson's voice was calm, but carried unmistakable authority. "Now, unless anyone here wants to explain to a Congressional Oversight Committee why they deliberately delayed a classified Pentagon mission, I suggest you clear a path to that aircraft." The officers parted, creating a path to the waiting jet. Only Randall remained defiant. "I need to see what's in that case," he insisted. "Airport security regulations are superseded by federal authority." Jackson finished for him. "Your credentials, please." When Randall hesitated, Jackson stepped a mile closer. "Your security credentials now." Reluctantly, Randall produced his ID card. Jackson examined it briefly. "Atlantic Shield Security Services," he read aloud. "Contracted by the airport authority." He pocketed the ID. "Consider your contract under review, Mr. Randall. My office will be in touch with your superiors." As Amara finally moved toward the jet, Admiral Richardson's voice came through her phone. "Are you boarding now?" "Yes, Admiral. Colonel Jackson arrived with a security team." "Good. The pilot has new clearance for priority takeoff. You'll be wheels up in 10 minutes. A pause. "And Amara, when this mission is complete, we're going to address what happened today, all the way up the chain." As Amara climbed the steps to the jet, she felt multiple emotions competing for dominance. Relief at the immediate danger passing, determination to complete her mission, and a deep simmering anger at the injustice she had endured. Behind her, Colonel Jackson was already organizing a full incident review, collecting officer names and badge numbers. The bureaucratic machinery of accountability was grinding into motion, small consolation for having faced the very real possibility of becoming another statistic in America's ongoing struggle with race and authority. As Amara's jet taxied toward the runway, the first video of her ordeal hit social media. A baggage handler had captured 4 minutes of the confrontation on his phone, uploading it with the caption, "Black woman surrounded by cops with guns drawn at Reagan Airport right now. She keeps saying she works for the Pentagon." Flying while black. Within 20 minutes, the video had been shared 20,000 times. By the time Amara's plane reached cruising altitude over Ohio, 3 major news networks had picked up the story. The Chirons told the tale in stark terms. Black Pentagon official held at gunpoint at Reagan National. Woman with top secret clearance surrounded by police at airport. Racial profiling? Pentagon engineer detained while trying to board flight. Social media exploded with hashtags. Amara Washington. Pentagon engineer held, flying while black. In Atlanta, Amara's parents saw the news breaking and tried desperately to reach their daughter, unaware she was already in flight. Colonel Washington, despite his 30 years of military service, felt the familiar cold dread that Black parents across America know too well, the fear that their child's credentials, education, and accomplishments might not be enough to protect them. At the Pentagon, Admiral Richardson was in emergency meetings with the Secretary of Defense, public affairs officers, and legal counsel. The incident had escalated from a security misunderstanding to a potential public relations crisis with racial implications that reached to the highest levels of government. "We need to get ahead of this," the Secretary insisted. "Dr. Washington is leading our most critical aerospace initiative. She's a decorated public servant who was treated like a criminal while trying to do her job." Atlantic Shield Security is already claiming they followed standard protocols, a public affairs officer reported, checking her tablet. "They're saying any passenger approaching a private jet without escort would receive the same response." "Bullshit," Richardson replied bluntly. "I've been watching white men walk to that same jet for years without a second glance from security." At Reagan National, airport management had descended on the scene in force. The airport director, sweating through his shirt despite the air conditioning, was attempting to contain the damage. "Who authorized weapons to be drawn?" he demanded of the assembled security personnel. "Who escalated this situation?" Sergeant Wilson shifted uncomfortably. "The contractor, Randall, reported a security breach. We responded according to protocols for unauthorized tarmac access." "Did anyone bother to check her credentials before surrounding her with guns?" the director asked incredulously. "She was approaching a restricted aircraft without escort," Randall insisted, still defiant despite being officially relieved of duty pending investigation. "She had Pentagon courier status," Lieutenant Hayes interjected. "That grants her direct aircraft access. It's in the federal guidelines we're all supposed to follow." As the airport officials argued, local news vans had set up camp outside the terminal. Reporters were interviewing witnesses, including passengers who had watched the scene unfold from terminal windows. "It was terrifying," one woman told a reporter. "All these officers with guns pointed at this professional-looking Black woman. She was so calm, kept saying she worked for the Pentagon. Nobody would listen." On Amara's jet, the pilot had patched through a secure call from Colonel Jackson. "Dr. Washington, I wanted to update you on the situation," Jackson said, his voice grave. "The incident has gone viral. News networks are covering it, and the Pentagon is preparing an official response." Amara closed her eyes briefly. "How bad is it?" "Multiple videos from different angles. Social media is erupting. Your name is trending nationwide." "My parents have been contacted and assured of your safety," Jackson confirmed. "Admiral Richardson spoke with them personally." Amara nodded, grateful for that small mercy at least. "What happens now?" "The Pentagon is standing firmly behind you. The Secretary plans to make a statement once you've landed safely in California." Jackson paused. "There will be investigations, internal affairs at the airport, review of the security contractor, possible civil rights inquiries." "And I'm at the center of all of it," Amara said quietly. "I'm afraid so. But Dr. Washington, Amara, you did everything right. You maintained professionalism under extreme duress. The fault lies entirely with those who failed to follow proper protocols." As the call ended, Amara gazed out the window at the darkening landscape below. Somewhere down there, millions of Americans were watching videos of her most vulnerable moment, forming opinions, arguing on social media, adding her name to the ever-growing list of Black Americans whose encounters with authority had gone terribly wrong. The difference was that she had survived. Her credentials had eventually been recognized. The system had corrected itself, however belatedly. But what about those without Pentagon clearance? Without admirals on speed dial? Without Colonel Jackson's arriving to set things right? Do you believe airport security treated Dr. Washington differently because of her race? Comment number 1 if you think this would have happened to anyone approaching a private jet. Or number 2, if you believe this is a clear case of racial profiling. If you've ever experienced or witnessed similar treatment, hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. What would you do if videos of your most vulnerable moment were suddenly all over the news? The spotlight on Dr. Washington is about to intensify as her story captivates the nation, but her mission remains uncompleted. The true test of her resilience is just beginning. Her phone pinged with a secure message from the test team in California. Seen the news. Are you okay? We still need those specs for tomorrow's test. Even now, the mission continued. National security waited for no one, not even a black woman traumatized by systemic racism. Amara straightened in her seat, powered up her secure tablet, and began reviewing the thermal shield modifications she'd developed. The world might be watching her ordeal, but she still had a job to do. As Amara's plane crossed over the Rocky Mountains, the full machinery of the Pentagon's crisis response team had activated. In a secure communications room, Deputy Secretary Williams was coordinating with multiple agencies. "I want a complete security team waiting when she lands at Edwards," Williams ordered. "And I want the Secretary of Defense briefed for a public statement within the hour." Across Washington, D.C., the ripple effects continued. 3 congressional representatives had already issued statements condemning the incident. Civil rights organizations were mobilizing responses. News networks had transitioned from breaking coverage to panel discussions analyzing the broader implications. This incident highlights the persistent reality that credentials, education, and even the highest security clearances don't shield Black Americans from racial profiling, said one commentator on a major network. At Reagan National Airport, the verification process that should have happened immediately was now occurring in painstaking retrospect. Airport authorities, FAA officials, and Pentagon security experts were reviewing every moment of the confrontation, identifying each procedural failure and protocol violation. Lieutenant Hayes had become the reluctant star witness, her testimony contradicting the accounts of both Sergeant Wilson and contractor Randall. Dr. Washington identified herself clearly and presented proper credentials from the outset, Hayes stated for the record. At no point did she present any behavior that warranted the level of force displayed. Randall, now suspended pending investigation, maintained his position. Unescorted individuals approaching restricted aircraft represent a security threat. I followed established protocols. The airport's security director pulled Hayes aside after her statement. "You're the only one who comes out of this looking good," he said quietly. "You tried to de-escalate." Hayes shook her head. "Not hard enough, not soon enough. I should have intervened the moment weapons were drawn." The security director looked troubled. "Between us, has this happened before? Selective enforcement based on race?" Hayes gave him a long look. "You really want me to answer that?" Back on the tarmac, Colonel Jackson's team was conducting a minute-by-minute reconstruction of events. Security camera footage was being collected, radio communications logged and transcribed, witness statements recorded. Atlantic Shield's contract specifically incorporates federal courier protocols, one investigator noted, reviewing documentation. "There's no ambiguity here. They violated their own procedures." Jackson nodded grimly. "Document everything. This isn't going away with an apology and a press release." Meanwhile, a more personal drama was unfolding in Atlanta. Colonel James Washington and his wife Evelyn sat in their living room, watching the continuous news coverage of their daughters. "Ordeal, she's safe," Evelyn repeated, holding her husband's hand tightly. "That's what matters. She's safe." Colonel Washington nodded, but his expression remained dark. 30 years I served this country. Combat deployments, Pentagon assignments, training the next generation, and my daughter still gets guns pointed at her for doing her job." James. "She did everything right, Evelyn. Everything we taught her. Education, excellence, composure under pressure. She reached the highest levels of clearance in the U.S. government, and none of it mattered the moment some racist security guard decided she didn't belong." "It will matter now," Evelyn said firmly. "Amara is too visible, too valuable for them to sweep this under the rug." As the Washingtons watched the coverage, Amara's plane began its descent into Edwards Air Force Base. Looking out the window, she could see an unusual reception committee waiting on the tarmac, a full security detail, medical personnel, and several high-ranking officers. The pilot's voice came over the intercom. "Dr. Washington, we've been instructed to allow you to deplane first. There's a welcoming committee waiting." "Thank you," Amara replied, gathering her secure materials. She had spent the flight alternating between reviewing technical specifications and processing the trauma of her experience, compartmentalizing as she'd been trained to do, focusing on the mission while acknowledging the emotional impact. As the plane touched down and taxied to a stop, Amara took a deep breath, preparing herself for what came next. The mission still took priority, but she knew the personal and political dimensions couldn't be ignored. The door opened, and Amara stepped onto the stairs. Below, a senior officer stepped forward from the welcoming committee, General Clark, the base commander himself. "Dr. Washington," he called up to her. "On behalf of the United States Air Force and the Department of Defense, I want to personally welcome you to Edwards Air Force Base." The public display was clearly choreographed, a visual counterpoint to the images now circulating worldwide of Amara surrounded by drawn weapons. As she descended the stairs, the assembled personnel stood at attention, offering a level of respect rarely shown to civilian contractors, even ones with her clearance level. "Thank you, General," Amara replied as she reached the tarmac. "I appreciate the welcome, but we have a test scheduled for tomorrow morning. I'd like to proceed to the lab immediately." Clark nodded, both surprised and impressed by her focus. "Of course. We have a secure vehicle waiting. Your test team has been working through the night to prepare, but they've been waiting for your modifications." As they walked to the waiting SUV, Clark spoke quietly. "Dr. Washington, I want you to know that the Secretary of Defense has been personally briefed on today's incident. There will be accountability." "I appreciate that, General. But right now, my priority is Project Hyperion." Clark studied her with newfound respect. "The vehicle is equipped with secure communications. Admiral Richardson has requested you call as soon as you're aboard." Inside the SUV, Amara found a secure satellite phone waiting. As the vehicle pulled away, heading toward the research facilities, she made the call. "Admiral, I've arrived at Edwards." "Thank God," Richardson replied. "Amara, I've been watching the footage. It's worse than I imagined." "It's being handled, Admiral. I'm focusing on tomorrow's test." "The test can wait if you need time." "With respect, Admiral, it can't wait. We have a narrow window for optimal atmospheric conditions, and the prototype is ready. I didn't go through all this to delay the mission." There was a pause, then Richardson's voice softened. "That's why you're the best, Washington. But when this test is complete, we're addressing what happened today. The Secretary is giving a statement in an hour and she's not pulling punches." As the call ended, Amara gazed out at the darkening desert landscape. In Washington, D.C., the political machinery was grinding into motion. In newsrooms across America, her story was being dissected and debated. On social media, her name was trending alongside hashtags about racial justice and systemic bias. But here, in this secure vehicle heading toward a classified facility, she was simply Dr. Amara Washington, the engineer with a mission to complete. The personal reckoning would come later. The policy implications would unfold in the days ahead. The cultural conversation would continue with or without her active participation. For now, she had heat shields to modify and a prototype to prepare. The country that had just reminded her, in the most visceral way possible, of her precarious status as a Black woman was also depending on her expertise to protect its interests. The irony wasn't lost on her. It never was. The Edwards Air Force Base research facility buzzed with activity despite the late hour. As Amara entered the main laboratory, conversations hushed momentarily before erupting into supportive murmurs. Her team, 15 engineers and scientists, who had been working around the clock, greeted her with a mixture of concern, respect, and awkward uncertainty. Dr. Chen, her deputy on the project, approached first. "Dr. Washington, we've seen the news. Are you okay?" "I'm fine, Daniel," Amara replied professionally. "Let's focus on the heat shield modifications. Where do we stand with the simulation results?" Chen nodded, understanding her need to maintain normalcy. We've run preliminary models based on your specifications, but we needed your final adjustments before implementation. Amara set her secure briefcase on a workstation and unlocked it with her fingerprint. Let's get to work then. We have less than 12 hours until the test window. As she spread out the modified designs and began briefing her team, Amara maintained the calm, authoritative presence that had earned her this position. If her hands trembled slightly, if her voice occasionally tightened when she thought about the weapons that had been aimed at her hours earlier, no one mentioned it. The technical challenge before her provided a welcome distraction from the personal and political storm swirling around her name. The thermal protection system for Project Hyperion was encountering unexpected stress fractures during simulated re-entry conditions. Amara's innovative solution involved a microscopic lattice structure that distributed heat more efficiently while maintaining structural integrity. As the team implemented her modifications, Amara's secure phone buzzed with a message from Admiral Richardson. Secretary's statement about to air. Thought you should see it. A nearby monitor switched to a news broadcast showing the Pentagon briefing room. The Secretary of Defense, a formidable woman with decades of public service, stood at the podium, addressing a packed room of journalists. Earlier today, Dr. Amara Washington, one of our nation's most brilliant aerospace engineers and a key leader of classified defense projects, was subjected to unacceptable treatment at Reagan National Airport while attempting to board a government transport in her official capacity. The secretary's voice was measured but carried unmistakable anger. Dr. Washington holds security clearances at the highest levels. She was carrying properly authorized credentials and following all protocols for her courier status. Despite this, she was surrounded by armed personnel, had weapons drawn on her, and was treated as a security threat without justification. A reporter interrupted. Is the Pentagon characterizing this as racial profiling? The secretary paused, then responded directly. The Department of Defense is conducting a thorough investigation into all aspects of this incident. What I can say unequivocally is that Dr. Washington was treated in a manner inconsistent with her status, her credentials, and her vital role in our nation's security apparatus. The department stands firmly behind Dr. Washington and is committed to ensuring this type of incident never happens again. Another reporter called out, "Has the president been briefed on the situation?" The president has been fully briefed and has directed a comprehensive review of security protocols for all federal facilities, with particular attention to ensuring equal treatment regardless of race, gender, or other personal characteristics. As the press conference continued, Amara turned her attention back to the project. Her team was watching her carefully, gauging her reaction. "The best response we can give," Amara said firmly, "is completing this test successfully. Let's get back to work." Throughout the night, as Amara and her team prepared the prototype for testing, the world beyond the secure facility continued to react to her story. News cycles rolled on with updated footage, expert analysis, and public commentary. Social media amplified personal stories from Black professionals who had faced similar situations. Civil rights organizations issued statements connecting Amara's experience to broader patterns of racial profiling. In Atlanta, Amara's parents fielded calls from family members, friends, and eventually journalists. Colonel Washington, drawing on his military discipline, provided a brief statement. "Our daughter has dedicated her career to serving this country. She deserves the same respect and presumption of legitimacy automatically granted to her white colleagues." At 2 in the ET morning, during a brief break while computer models processed the latest simulations, Amara finally called her parents. "Mom, Dad, I'm okay," she said immediately, knowing their concern. "Baby girl," her mother's voice broke slightly, "we saw everything on the news. I followed the protocols Dad taught me. Stay calm, move slowly, speak clearly." Her father's voice came through tight with emotion. "You shouldn't have had to use those protocols. Not with your credentials, not at a secure government facility." "I know, Dad, but I did, and I'm safe. That's what matters right now." The Secretary of Defense made a statement, her mother said. "They're taking this seriously." "They have to," her father replied, skepticism evident. "It's too public to..." Ignore. Amara sighed. Look, I have to focus on this test. It's crucial, and I've got a team depending on me. We can talk more afterward, okay? After reassuring her parents and ending the call, Amara stepped into a private office and allowed herself 5 minutes, just 5, to process the emotions she'd been compartmentalizing. Fear, anger, humiliation, exhaustion. She acknowledged each in turn, then carefully packed them away again. The mission came first. Personal reckoning would have to wait. When she rejoined her team, Dr. Chen approached with a tablet. "You should see this," he said quietly. The screen showed an internal Pentagon memo that had been leaked to the press. It detailed immediate policy changes for federal facilities, including mandatory acceptance of digital credential verification and explicit protocols preventing security personnel from drawing weapons on individuals presenting federal identification without clear and present danger. "They're calling it the Washington Protocol," Chen said. "It's being implemented immediately at all government facilities." Amara absorbed this information with complex emotions. On one hand, it represented meaningful change that might prevent others from experiencing what she had endured. On the other, it was a stark reminder of how exceptional circumstances had to be to generate policy changes that should have been common sense. "Let's make sure we give them something worth protecting," she replied, turning back to the prototype. Final checks on the heat shield modifications. The test window opens in 4 hours. As dawn broke over the California desert, Amara stood in the control room, watching as Project Hyperion prepared for its critical test. The modified heat shields, her design, her innovation, would either withstand the simulated conditions or fail spectacularly. Around her, military officers, government officials, and her technical team waited in tense anticipation. Despite the drama surrounding her arrival, despite the national conversation her experience had sparked, despite her personal trauma, in this moment, Dr. Amara Washington was being judged solely on the merit of her work. And that, perhaps, was the purest form of equality she could hope for. 3 weeks after the incident at Reagan National Airport, Dr. Amara Washington sat in a congressional hearing room, adjusting the microphone before her. The room was packed with legislators, media, and public observers. C-SPAN cameras captured her composed expression as she prepared to testify. Project Hyperion's test had been a resounding success. The heat shield modifications had performed beyond expectations, advancing the timeline for full implementation by months. That technical victory had given Amara the professional capital she needed for what came next, addressing the systemic issues her experience had exposed. "Dr. Washington," began Congresswoman Chen, chairing the Committee on Homeland Security, "thank you for appearing today. Before we discuss the broader implications of what occurred at Reagan National, could you please describe the events in your own words?" Amara leaned slightly toward the microphone. 3 weeks ago, while attempting to board a government transport in my capacity as lead engineer on a classified Pentagon project, I was surrounded by multiple armed officers on the tarmac at Reagan National Airport. Despite presenting valid Pentagon credentials and having proper courier authorization for classified materials, I was held at gunpoint for approximately 35 minutes before being allowed to proceed with my mission. "And in your assessment, why did this occur?" Amara paused, choosing her words carefully. The official explanation cites procedural failures and communication breakdowns. My personal assessment, based on both this incident and similar experiences throughout my career, is that my race and gender created an assumption of suspicion that overrode my credentials. A Republican congressman interjected. "Dr. Washington, isn't it standard procedure to question individuals approaching restricted aircraft?" "It is standard to verify credentials," Amara replied evenly. "It is not standard to surround someone with drawn weapons before attempting such verification, particularly when that individual is openly displaying federal identification." I would invite the congressman to ask himself if a white male colleague with identical credentials would have received the same response. The hearing continued for hours, with Amara maintaining her professional composure while delivering devastating testimony about the incident and its broader implications. The security camera footage and officer body cam videos, played for the committee, clearly contradicted initial statements from security personnel that Amara had been uncooperative or behaved suspiciously. Particularly damning was the timeline. Weapons had been drawn within 20 seconds of Amara being spotted approaching the aircraft, well before any attempt to verify her credentials had been made. 2 days after the hearing, the Department of Justice announced a civil rights investigation into Atlantic Shield Security Services, the contractor that had employed Randall. Simultaneously, the Pentagon unveiled comprehensive new security protocols, the formally named Washington Protocols, establishing clear standards for credential verification and use of force at federal facilities. Randall himself had been terminated and was facing potential criminal charges for filing false reports about the incident. Sergeant Wilson had been demoted and reassigned to administrative duties pending further review. Lieutenant Hayes, who had attempted to de-escalate the situation, had been commended and promoted. For Amara, the professional consequences were complex and far-reaching. She had become, overnight, both a symbol and a spokesperson for issues she had spent her career trying to transcend. Her engineering brilliance, the reason she had been on that tarmac in the first place, was temporarily overshadowed by her identity as a black woman confronting systemic bias. "Dr. Washington," said Deputy Secretary Williams during a private meeting at the Pentagon, "in light of recent events, we're creating a new position overseeing security protocol reforms across all defense facilities. The Secretary would like you to consider taking the role." Amara studied the older man carefully. "Is this a promotion, or a way to move me away from technical leadership?" Williams looked uncomfortable. "It's a recognition of your unique perspective and expertise. Project Hyperion's success demonstrated your technical capabilities. This new role would allow you to address the systemic issues you experienced firsthand, while moving me out of the spotlight on the technical side," Amara noted. "The decision is entirely yours," Williams replied. "Project Hyperion leadership remains open to you if that's your preference." After careful consideration and conversations with her parents and Admiral Richardson, Amara accepted the new position. Not because she wanted to move away from engineering, but because she recognized the rare opportunity to implement meaningful change from within the system. Her first official act was establishing the Washington Foundation for Diversity in STEM, using a portion of the substantial settlement she had received from Atlantic Shield Security and the Airport Authority. The foundation would provide scholarships and mentorship for minority students pursuing careers in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. "Being exceptional isn't enough," Amara explained during the foundation's launch event. "I had the highest possible security clearance, multiple advanced degrees, and Pentagon authorization, and I still had guns drawn on me for walking while black. We need to change the systems, not just prepare individuals to survive them." 6 months after the incident, Amara returned to Reagan National Airport. This time, she was accompanied by her own security detail as she conducted an official review of the newly implemented protocols. The same terminal where she had once been, held at gunpoint, now displayed prominent signage about federal credential verification procedures and bias prevention training. As she walked confidently across the same tarmac where she had feared for her life, Amara reflected on the complex reality of being simultaneously a victim and a champion. The incident had been traumatic and unjust. Nothing could erase that fact. But the response, the accountability, and the systemic changes that followed represented progress that might benefit countless others who lacked her exceptional credentials and connections. In her office at the Pentagon, larger now with a view of the Potomac, Amara kept a small frame containing her original ID card, the one she had tried to show on that fateful day. Beside it sat her new credential, featuring enhanced security, features and explicit language about bearer rights that she had personally helped design. The difference between those two IDs represented both how far she had come and how far the system still had to go. One credential had failed to protect her. The other was helping to protect thousands like her. Later that week, Amara met with a group of young black women engineers who had reached out after her congressional testimony. They gathered in a conference room at Howard University, sharing experiences and strategies for navigating spaces not designed with them in mind. "The hardest lesson I've learned," Amara told them, is that excellence isn't enough. Credentials aren't enough. We have to change the systems themselves, even as we continue to excel within them. A young doctoral candidate raised her hand. How do you balance the technical work you love with being forced into the role of spokesperson and symbol? Amara smiled ruefully. Imperfectly. Some days I miss being judged solely on my engineering solutions rather than being Dr. Washington of the Washington Protocols. But I remind myself that this platform, however it came to me, creates opportunities for substantive change. As the session ended, Amara handed each young woman a small card containing her direct contact information, a personal commitment to mentorship that went beyond institutional programs. Your brilliance deserves recognition without qualification, she told them. And while we work toward that world, know that you're not navigating these challenges alone. The last image captured by university photographers that day showed Amara displaying her new Pentagon I.D. alongside the next generation of Black women engineers, a visual testimony to how institutional power, properly directed, could begin to address even the most entrenched biases. It wasn't justice, not completely. No policy change could erase those 35 minutes on the tarmac with weapons aimed at her vital organs. No promotion could eliminate the reality that her credentials had been insufficient protection against racial assumptions. No foundation could guarantee that the young women before her wouldn't face similar situations. But it was progress. Hard-won, imperfect, essential progress. And for Dr. Amara Washington, that would have to be enough for now. Dr. Washington's story illuminates a harsh reality many face daily. Excellence and credentials aren't always enough to overcome racial bias. Even with Pentagon clearance, advanced degrees, and leadership of classified projects, Black Americans remain vulnerable to systemic prejudice that can turn routine situations into life-threatening encounters. The story demonstrates how institutional racism operates independently of individual merit. Dr. Washington did everything right, obtained elite education, reached the highest security clearance levels, and demonstrated exceptional professional competence. Yet none of these achievements protected her from being viewed as inherently suspicious. Equally important is how power responded to injustice. Real change required visibility, connections, and institutional leverage that most victims of racial profiling don't possess. The Washington Protocols emerged not just from the incident itself, but from Dr. Washington's unique position to demand accountability. The ultimate lesson is twofold. We must acknowledge both the persistence of racial bias across all social levels and our collective responsibility to change the systems that perpetuate it. Individual excellence cannot solve structural problems. True progress requires institutional transformation and policies that protect everyone, regardless of whether they have a Pentagon I.D. to flash in their defense. Has someone ever doubted your credentials or questioned your right to be somewhere based on how you look? Share your experience in the comments below. If Dr. Washington's story resonated with you, please hit that like button to help more people see these crucial narratives. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories that expose discrimination and celebrate resilience. By sharing this video, you help spark important conversations about racial justice in America. Thank you for watching and engaging with these difficult but necessary discussions. Remember, awareness is just the beginning. Real change happens when we translate understanding into action.